they were true brothers and sisters. They were true family.
Well, good morning and welcome to Chinook Podcast. This is a podcast where we are praying and working for the winds of the Holy Spirit to move in Western Canada, and we are asking God to bring a deep knowledge and love for Christ all across of our province and our nation. Mm-hmm. So anyway, welcome everyone, and today we've got Jeremy Gardiner with us on the podcast. He's a member of our congregation, so welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me.
And I think we're just going to start off with book recommendations, and I think we'll let Jeremy start off with his book recommendation.
You know, one of the topics that I'm going to be talking about is just parenting kids with autism, and this is a book that my wife just heavily recommends, so I want to let you know about that. It's called Too Wise to be Mistaken, Too Good to be Unkind, Christian Parents Contend with Autism by Kathy Steer. So that'd be a good one to check out.
That would be a good one to check out.
Excellent. All right.
Okay. I have in front of me a book that I remember reading about 30 years ago by Gary North. It's called Victims' Rights, The Biblical View of Civil Justice, in which Gary North digs into the laws in Leviticus, in Exodus, in Numbers, and he walks through a whole host of different things related to civil justice. So he'll have a chapter, for instance, he'll have chapters on the covenant lawsuit, the death penalty, on kidnapping, on legitimate violence, on the ransom for an eye, the ransom for a life, the pitfalls of negligence, a whole bunch of things where he has dug into what is taught us in the laws that were given to Israel, and saying thereby, well, these are we can delineate from these good principles for civil justice.
Well, that's excellent. Like the one chapter about negligence is probably dealing with the parapet around the
I expect it is
the roof of the house.
I expect it is dealing with that.
That's why you all should check your brakes on your car, lest you find yourself negligent, unable to stop, and into the back end of somebody else's car.
There you go.
Just saying.
Or in the Wapiti River.
That's a problem. That's a problem.
Okay, so that's my book, Victims' Rights by Gary North.
Oh, excellent.
All right. Well, I've got a book as well. It's called the Pastoral Care Companion. It's a Lutheran service book prepared by the Commission on Worship of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. I think it's actually a great book for pastors, for elders, for deacons, for anybody who's involved in care in the church. And it involves like a lot of liturgical stuff for worship, but it also involves like a lot of written and formed prayers for just
different situations. Yeah,
different situations, pastoral care in the church, praying for the sick, praying for the bereaved, praying for people struggling with demonic affliction. So I've used this to write my congregational prayers for worship, and I've used this at various points in time. Helpful book.
Most excellent. All right, so for my book recommendation, this is a classic, The Walking Drum by Louis L'Amour.
Louis L'Amour book.
I love that story. That story was one of the first places where a desire to know the old writings was really inculcated in me as a youth. Because one of the things Louis L'Amour talks about as he follows his character Martin, as he travels and bumbles across Europe and Africa and Asia, is literature. Louis L'Amour talks about literature. Now he's a bit of an Arabophile.
Arabophile?
Yeah, just really high up on Arab culture. Of course, one of the things that he didn't understand was how much of that was Jewish and Christian, with an Arab name slapped on it.
Right.
But these things happen. So, but that book really, it really worked in me a love for old literature. The way he spoke about it, very poetically, very persuasively, convinced me. And if you would capture a man's heart, you must paint a picture in his mind, and this is what Louis did in this book for me. So,
Yeah, good.
The Walking Drone.
Excellent.
Okay.
I read a great many Louis L'Amour books when I was a boy.
I've read all of them.
Yeah, and there are many.
Yes.
So there's not a lot of action. There's a ton of dialogue in Louis L'Amour.
Oh, there's lots of
No,
action.
there's lots of action.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Nobody
You,
writes.
you might be thinking of like Zane Grey or something.
Yeah,
like
See,
that.
I've not read enough Louis L'Amour.
There you go.
I just read the dialogue sections, I guess.
You must have got a boring one or something.
Yeah, well, some of his short stories are dialogue heavy, but nobody writes a fist fight like him or a gunfight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the wake of the collapse of our favorite hockey team,
That's fresh wounds.
the fresh wounds.
Yeah.
So speaking of the hockey,
Elbows up, Canada.
elbows, yeah, no, sticks up.
No, I was really chastened, I think, in my love of my Oilers when the goalie for the wrong team stands up and says, well, thanks be to God the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Yes, it turns out that Bobrovsky's a good Trinitarian.
Yes, he is.
And this was the winning team in Florida, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw something about that.
Yeah, I was like, man, oh. Well, and to be fair, the losing team does openly support a whole pile of things
Yes,
that I
they
don't.
do.
So maybe it's just divine judgment.
Divine judgment on Alberta.
Jeremy's giving me the side eye. He still loves the Oilers.
There was weeping in the Gardiner home last night.
Well, it got so bad that my boys were like, Dad, can we just go watch Doctor Who? And I'm like, oh.
The last 2 years, we had the Donovans over to watch a game with us, and every time that they came over, we lost. So we decided
You
to
stopped-
not.
you stopped
we
inviting
didn't
them.
invite them over this year, but we still lost.
They still lost. That's sad.
Yeah, that's funny. This team never ceases to disappoint. I mean,
Come on, McDavid. All right.
oh, well. That's
See,
fine.
this is all I know, that McDavid plays on the Oilers
Yep.
team. I have not watched a single game.
Oh,
Sorry,
Heathen.
guys.
barbarian. Anyway, so today we got our dear friend Jeremy here.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really good to have you in the room here with us, Jeremy. We're going to just have some good conversation, I'm pretty sure.
So
Yeah.
we should probably start off by asking you, for the sake of our audience, not so much for our sake,
Yes.
but for the sake of the audience, who are you? Where'd you come from?
Sure. My name is Jeremy Gardiner, and I've lived all over Canada. I was born in Ontario, spent most of my life, well, probably not now, but a lot of my life in Newfoundland, and now I call Grande Prairie, Alberta home. I've been married to my beautiful bride, Amanda, for it'll be 19 years this summer.
Excellent.
And we have 5 children together, ages 7 through 16. And 2 of our kids are on the autism spectrum. And it has its own challenges, but life is good. We're very happy. If you want to know a little bit more about me, I love making theological content. I've been doing a lot on YouTube right now. At Theology Jeremy is where I make my videos. Basically, just I talk a lot of topics, but it's all about how the Bible applies to life, or how to have a biblical worldview for all of life. But I also love getting into some side topics like church history and biblical manhood and things like that. In the past, in 2016, I did write a book on head covering, and I'm now working on my second book, which is a Christian view of mixed martial arts. So that's kind of what I've been putting my time into.
Oh, nice. So it's all about the right hand of fellowship, followed by the left hook.
Yes.
I might have misunderstood Paul's statement on that one. He was not talking about boxing.
Teaching men how to fight at presbytery meetings again.
Oh, yes.
There you go.
All right. So you have a story of coming to faith as well. Can you tell us a little bit about how you how you came to faith and how you came to a greater knowledge of the gospel?
Yeah, so I did grow up as a pastor's kid. My dad is ordained in the Pentecostal church. And so even though I did grow up around the faith, I was a hypocrite. So oftentimes people lean one of two ways. They lean the prodigal way, where they run headlong into sin, or they lean the elder brother way, where they're prideful and think they got everything all together. I was the prodigal. I wanted to go to heaven in the end, but wanted to completely live a self-indulgent life. And so I just wanted to know what I couldn't do, and acted self-righteously. You know, I could go to the clubs and try to pick up women, but just couldn't sleep with a married woman. So, and that would make me righteous because I did not commit adultery. So that type of thinking. I was the type of guy who, you know, my parents would ask me if I'm reading my Bible. This is obviously after I left home, and just would only read it when someone was checking up on me. I was the guy who sat in the back pew and ran as soon as the service was over, just didn't want the Christian fellowship. So just a complete and total hypocrite who thought he was right with God, but wanted to live for himself. And so in December 2004, I was 19 years old, and I got up out of bed, and I went to search the internet for biblical loopholes to continue in lust.
Oh,
Yes, that kind of shows you where my mind is. Wanted to know, I wanted to hear a pastor or somebody say, hey, it's okay. What Jesus says in Matthew 5,
Doesn't count.
Doesn't count. That's not in the original Greek, but so I wanted to hear that it was misinterpreted. But instead, God in his good providence had me read about the horrors of hell that night. And he kind of just used that to wake me up, to show me my true state, that I was a hypocrite. So I remember I got down off the computer late at night, living by myself. I got down on my hands and knees and just confessed my hypocrisy, and surrendered my life to Christ, and I've been living for him since that day.
excellent.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
So when somebody says, I can't go to the church, it's full of hypocrites, I can't help but think that's a perfect place for them.
Yeah, what's your answer?
It is, and there are people who do bad things in Jesus' name. There's people who say that they live for him and don't. But when you choose to follow Christ, you're choosing to follow him based on who Jesus is. Mm-hmm. And he is perfect. He is not a hypocrite. He only does what is good. So don't let, because this is something we all have to deal with. We're constantly, those of us, especially who are online, we're noticing pastors who fall in ministry, or leaders that we've looked up to, show that they've been living a double life, and it is discouraging. Mm-hmm. But when you put your eyes away from my confidence is not built on this person who's living it out perfectly, but on Jesus, who has never failed me and has kept all of his promises and is perfectly good. That's kind of how you can not have your confidence shaken. So move it from looking at people to looking at Christ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Too many people put their faith in men.
Yeah, please don't put your faith in me.
No.
Yeah.
No, that's a terrible idea. Well, I wouldn't even do that.
No, it's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us about some of your challenges with cancer and what led you, first about some of your challenges with cancer, what led you to Ontario and then Alberta. Kind of give people an idea of how to face suffering in faith.
Yeah, so I remember I had a close family member. I'm trying not to give them away, but anyway, it's a family member who basically said, everything goes perfect for the Gardiners. Everything goes well for them. They never suffer. They never have to go through anything. And up to that point, that was honestly pretty accurate in the sense that we had a pretty good life. God has been extremely gracious and good to us, and I haven't had to go through too much. But in the summer of 2017, God let me experience some pretty rough suffering. So my wife was pregnant with our fifth kid, And I was diagnosed with cancer. I had even more serious than the cancer is I had blood clots in my lungs, which if that wasn't dealt with right away would have killed me, because I was working out a lot because I was training to be a police officer. As I remember one time there was lots of different signs, but one time I was just running on the treadmill and I just blacked out. And that's kind of not something you do when you're pretty healthy. And so it was kind of like a sign that something was wrong inside. So I had blood clots in my lungs. I ended up going through chemotherapy. I also lost the use of my legs. And so I was bedridden for over 2 months, and I had to relearn how to walk. So I spent a lot of time in a wheelchair, a lot of time in bed. And it was just a time of a lot of suffering and difficulty. And as far as, I learned, God taught me a lot of lessons through that. I think one thing that helped me going in was that I had good theology of suffering. And I understood God is sovereign. He is good. He has purpose in it. Like, this didn't happen because you failed and you're this sinner and he's throwing his wrath on you and showing his displeasure. But he is good, and he's doing this for a good purpose. Romans 8:28 says, for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. So when you have the understanding that God loves you and he has purpose in this, he hasn't lost control, and he's actually using this for your good, it helps you to approach suffering good. But even though I had this theology that helped me grounded, I got to experience, the limitations of the human body and the frailty to where the point where I was still asking questions that I thought my theology would keep me from asking, like, why me?
Right.
I honestly thought that, I wouldn't wrestle with those kinds of questions, but I did. And so it kind of helped me to understand and to sympathize more with people who wrestle with questions like, where is God in all this?
Yeah. And
so, I really think that, one thing that when I talk about, God's good purpose in it, I think about how Jesus says in Hebrews 4 that, we do not have a high priest who's unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one in every respect who has been tempted as we are without sin. Jesus lived a life that, one where he understood what we went through. He understood the temptations. He understood the frailty of being a human, and that helps us to trust him more, because we understand, like, you went through what we do. You know what it's like to be tired, what it's like to be, to face life's difficulties. And I really felt like me going through and having a very easy life, especially, I didn't mention this, but I was wanting to enter pastoral ministry. And I really felt like God was giving me a taste of weakness and a taste of suffering so that I could sympathize with other people in their weaknesses.
Right.
And so I kind of, I even through it, I kind of felt like, you know what, you're doing something good in here. And I just want to pass the test. I don't want it to be like Job's wife, curse God and die. I want to suffer well and let you teach me through it. So
that, Jeremy, that's fascinating. That you can know something and you can know it truly, but until it really, really gets tested in you, then you really find out how well you knew that, or if you really didn't know that as well as you thought you did.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's certainly the case.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. One other thing I'll just share is just kind of like something that helped me to suffer well was that I learned to not compare my suffering. Didn't do this perfectly, by the way. This is more like a reflection having gone through it, because I remember driving home, my wife driving me home, and me, as we're driving down White Avenue in Edmonton, I was looking around at all the people just walking to and fro, and here I am not able to stand on my legs and just thinking, like, you don't know how good you guys got it. You guys are taking this for granted.
Right.
You and your working legs.
Yeah.
And
how dare you?
So I know what it's like, and I was not perfect in it, but one thing that really helped me was to just not compare myself to those who've got it better, but to compare myself to those who are actually suffering worse than me. Because when I compare myself to those who've are doing just fine, it stirs up discontent and bitterness, and you have pity on yourself. But when you compare and contrast yourself to those who have it worse, you start to have gratitude and realize, you know what, I'm not experiencing the worst of it. And so when you either read like a Bible book like Job, like no one can read the book of Job and say, you know what, I got it worse than him. Like, no, if that's you've been gentle to me compared to Job. And or when you spend time in a cancer ward and you see all the people who are suffering. Like I remember one story in particular. My wife, she's like 8 or 9 months pregnant at this time, and she's wheeling me around the cancer ward, you know, just kind of, this is our date nights where we just talk as she walks me around. And we ran into another Christian couple, you know, that they had like 8 or 9 children at the time, you know, kind of a homeschool Christian family out on a farm. And my doctor had given me like high 90% chance of recovery, and he was expected to die very soon. And I thought, like, you know, we were both being wheeled around by our wives. We both are in tremendous amounts of suffering. We both have kids, but I'm expected to go back to my kids and make a full recovery. And you are going to be dying anytime. And he did die very soon. And so it's hard to look at a situation like that and to go bitter or pity yourself, knowing that other people have it much worse than you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's something about suffering well endured that works gratitude.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is something that we've probably across the last couple of generations in the Canadian church, we've done a poor job of teaching this. Certain people have learned it. Yeah. But institutionally, I don't think we've done a very good job of teaching that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's something
because people do have disastrous things happen in their lives, and
all the time.
But they're people here and there. But the church, on the other hand, I don't know. It takes.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, we're called to shepherd.
Yeah,
we're called to shepherd all of these folks.
Yeah.
It's like the police, right? Nobody calls the cops unless it's their worst day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Sometimes it feels like that a little bit when you're in church leadership, where nobody calls you unless there's a problem. You see a phone, you look at your phone, you're like, oh, what now, right?
Or when there's a baby.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But that's a good thing. That's not a disaster.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, preparing our people to suffer well.
So
in community is something we need to be doing.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just thinking of Romans 5, verses 3 to 5 here. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. So would you say that that's true?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's no question that the suffering I went through made me a better man, taught me more life lessons, helped me to be more compassionate and understanding towards it. And there's so many other things too. Like I'll bring up one other quick story, because like it was a nice contrast, because I had just been in I joined a union in the film industry. And I noticed that, you know, having grown up in church, we use familial language, we call each other brothers and sisters. And this was the first work environment where they also used the term brothers and sisters when I went in there to their union meetings. And this is just around the time where I got cancer. And I remember being like, oh, wow, brothers and sisters, huh? So when I got cancer, you know, I never got a phone call. No one checked up on me from the union. No one showed up at the house. I remember I called and said, hey, look, I'm not gonna be able to work for several years. Can we pause my union dues? Nope, can't do that either. Oh. It's like, okay, this is not quite a family. And then my church, on the other hand, you know, they pooled together. They gave generously. I remember they took up a collection of $7,500 for me and my family.
Nice.
We had several of them in our homes, cleaning our homes for my wife, babysitting us, showing up at the hospital to praying for me regularly from the pulpit. They were true brothers and sisters. They were true family. And so, Yeah, that was another thing, is just the benefit of suffering with a family, with the Church of God. And then and if you don't have your physical family, and not all of us are privileged either, they might not be alive or they might live in another area, but when you have the church, you have brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers in the faith, and they can help you through that suffering.
Yeah, I love hearing about the church and when she's working right.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Amen.
Meal trains are a gift from
Yes, they are.
Yeah, that's when something goes wrong in our church. One of the first things we do is organize food.
Meal train.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. No, that's good stuff.
So I guess we can move on to the next question. Tell us why you live in Grande Prairie. I know you've thought through this very well. Maybe you could quick tell us why you went to Ontario first, and then
We think
what
you
brought
thought
you
through
out
this
here.
very well.
Yeah, well, I've read your whole paper on this, and it's quite thoroughly thought out.
Yeah, for those who don't know what they're talking about, I wrote a family paper to share both the reasons why we moved to Grande Prairie for my kids, but also so that they would catch the vision, so that they would want to stay as well. And so that's we kind of went over that as a men's group as well, and kind of had that good discussion amongst ourselves. So yeah, briefly went to Ontario because I enrolled in the Master of Divinity program at Wycliffe College, which is the University of Toronto. And you're required to do 1 year of in-person study. So going there to Ontario was never meant to be a permanent move. It was meant to just do that 1 year in person and then come back. Unfortunately, moved there in the summer of 2020. Do you guys remember anything that happened in 2020?
No. I've forgotten.
None of us were affected by that.
So I never got to step foot on campus once, even though that was the purpose to move there, because they never opened that year. So here I am, moved there for that purpose. I'm still doing Zoom classes. Didn't really need to move. But anyways, the one thing that really opened our eyes there was just kind of, Ontario is far more liberal. And Toronto is a big city, and so when you're at the height of COVID there, you realize, just to be fair, it was being run by a conservative premier, but he didn't always act like it.
Nope.
But anyways, much more liberal, and we noticed that kind of when you have the more liberal a place is, usually the more government power, the more government overreach, the bigger the city, the more surveillance. And so we kind of felt like while we were in Ontario, we had, the walls were closing in on us. There was a lot of stay-at-home orders. We were hearing about places like Australia and just we're worried about them closing inter-province travel. Yep. And so we were just like, you know what, this could go really bad for us here. Like, this is not where we want to be. So let's speed up our exit out of here and move on to our forever home. Because that was the goal, is just go there, get the 1 year of education, and then pick a place to lay down roots. And so we chose Grande Prairie. And so having spent a year in Ontario at the worst possible time that anyone could ever live in Toronto.
Yes.
It really helped us to understand what we were looking for in a place. So we wanted to be in a conservative province that pushes back on government overreach. So that's kind of like maybe your Albertas or Saskatchewans are kind of two of the primary ones. But then we realized that even being in a more conservative province is not good enough if you're in a city. Some of the same downsides that we experienced in Toronto were being duplicated in Edmonton and Calgary. And so we knew that a bigger place still has lots of surveillance and they can more easily enforce government overreach. So we wanted to be in a smaller place. Now, one of the things that I thought through was because I grew up in a small town in Newfoundland. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I know about that place is that none of the kids stayed. And right. The reason is not because it's not a beautiful place on the ocean with its own distinct culture, which it all is. It's because they had no jobs.
And throttle industry.
Yeah, so they had to leave to get work. And so I never wanted to move my family to our forever home at a place where they loved this place and had relationships, but realized that they had to go to be able to provide for their families.
Right, because half of Newfoundland's in Alberta.
That's true. Yes, high density in Fort McMurray. So we wanted to be in a place that had some industry as well. So we didn't want to pick too small of a place to where they had to leave. And there were a couple other reasons too. I spent a lot of, I mentioned that I moved a lot when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And as I got older, the downsides of constantly moving really became more evident. I'll just briefly, one thing is that, our words are important. Sharing the gospel message, that can absolutely change your life, just sharing it. But our life authenticates that message, whether it's true or false, whether it works or doesn't. And so it's one thing to say, okay, you know what, this is marriage advice. Right. But then they watch your marriage for 50 years, or they watch you as you lose a child or go through cancer or experience, rough life, and you still stay faithful. You don't say, curse God and die. Right. You stay together. That is a powerful testimony to your words. And so I realized it's like, I spent a lot of time sharing the gospel in Edmonton, and going through cancer and suffering in a way where I was seeking to honor and glorify God, authenticated that message. And then when we moved to Ontario, all that was gone.
Right, because you don't know anybody.
Right, because exactly, all your history of that particular suffering, no one knows it.
No one knows it. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you're starting new relationships. You haven't built up capital to where they can trust you and trust your message and want to hear from you. And so I realized, if you're living this nomadic life, you're not building these deep relationships, and it's harming your witness. So we wanted to stay in one place, and also fruitfulness, doesn't happen quickly usually. It's faithfulness over time. And so if we want to see the kingdom of God infiltrate an area and institutions formed and reformed, we realize that we need to be in one place for the long haul. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we chose Grande Prairie. We moved here in summer of 2021, and we have no plans to leave, Lord willing, of course, but we want to make this place our forever home.
Something that you guys did that is an important, it's an important part of moving. If you're going from one place to another, find a church.
Oh yes.
Do some digging.
Mm-hmm.
I remember getting a phone call from Amanda and talking to her for about an hour, trying to figure out. She's trying to figure out Grande Prairie and trying to figure out a place to go and what are things like, and so just really check things out. That's good.
Absolutely.
That needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, at that time we were meeting in a garage somewhere.
Yes, a shop.
Yes, yes. It was beautiful too. Coming from Ontario to where churches are closed more than they're often during this time, and just see you guys, still worshiping even in a dusty old garage owned by somebody to my right, and was beautiful.
Packed into a shop, everybody sharing germs. It's amazing.
It was great fun.
It was special memories.
Well, you folks brought such a interesting new dynamic on a whole bunch of different levels. Because of this shape and state of your family, you've got a couple of boys who are on the autism scale, and Lenny very much so.
Yes.
Right. And I remember, I think it was maybe it might have been the second Sunday you were present, maybe the first Sunday, maybe the second. I don't remember. But I was standing up front, just I think I was doing announcements or something like that at the start of the service. Mm-hmm. And your young fellow let out one of his howls, and it was so loud. I was disoriented. I forgot what I was doing.
It still happens regularly, but the church isn't phased anymore. It just recognizes it.
Yeah, we're all like, oh, Lenny's just worshiping Jesus. It's okay.
Every once in a while, you see a new visitor kind of like turn their head around, being like, "What is that noise?" Yeah. Anyway, it's good.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of fun. And then, of course, my boys and your boys just get on like a house on fire.
Yeah.
I'm surprised the house isn't on fire. I should probably phone my wife. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this church was exactly what we need. Like we really were, when we came from Ontario, like I didn't really mention it, but we were really hurting. Like all of the isolation, the stay-at-home orders, the churches closed, going to a place where we didn't have relationships. And so it was really hard to make relationships during COVID. Just coming here and just being welcome with open arms, with a great community of people. Amanda's never had more friends than she's ever had here. The group of guys here was just like, I wish that, people got to experience. I hope people get to experience what we get to experience with our guys, like specifically our 7 and 9 meetings, and just how close we all are after church, talking about good things. Me and Brad were talking about the council in IC after church last week.
Nice.
And it's just wonderful. So the strong relationships was exactly what we needed, and so we felt right at home, and we're really thankful God brought us here.
Yeah, so I think I wanted to talk a little bit as well about some of your challenges with autism in your home, and also to get us to reflect on how churches can serve families with autistic children, because I know sometimes it can easily become very isolating for families with autistic children. So I don't know if you have some thoughts on that, and we can engage with you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who don't know, autism spectrum disorder, it's a development condition which affects how a person communicates, how they interact socially, and how they experience the world. It's known as a spectrum because it doesn't affect everybody the same way. And so there's, you can be high functioning to where you can communicate well, but maybe you struggle socially and you can't learn as fast or at the same level as other people. Or you could be lower functioning to where maybe you're nonverbal, or you're a threat to yourself even and can't care for yourself. And so there's different severities of it. And so we have one child who is high functioning, and he, his particular challenges are, he finds it difficult, for example, to communicate well. Like he can't recognize body language or tone or things like sarcasm.
I ran into that problem with him once.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so you take everything
or metaphor
in a more hyper literal sense, and also just very behind educationally as well. Whereas one of my other sons, he is low functioning, and he has a very low ability for verbal communication. He's been getting better. There has been some progress, but often just speaks with 1 or 2 words at a time. Just says spaghetti or something like that. Like which is super helpful now.
That's helpful. Yeah,
we didn't always have that.
Yeah.
But he has other challenges in the sense that, he can often be violent towards other people or himself. He runs away, is a threat to run away from home, and just always got to have a watchful eye. So if you've never grown up with somebody around autism, you don't have somebody in your church, I'll just kind of share a couple different things, because what Pastor Nathan just said is so true. It's like we often find, like me and Amanda, we often look at ourselves, and we just sometimes wonder if anyone understands what we actually go through in a day. Like it can find, we often feel like, if people only knew, everybody else on Christmas morning is opening presents. We're scrubbing spaghetti off the walls and the roof from the thrown cans, all around, that type of thing. And so some of the challenges that we face, just to kind of give you a window in our lives, first is like hypervigilance. Like we're never able to relax, wondering what's happening in the next room. Even why is it so quiet? If it's quiet, there's usually
that's a big problem.
A problem, exactly. Yeah. Like we've seen sometimes before where, the little one will go downstairs in a room and hop in the freezer and shut the door on him. Like, that's like you have no idea what that does when you find him. Like that's, you can't relax, because like if you don't hear from him fast enough, what is wrong?
And that's not a normal place. You think, oh, I'm just going to look in a freezer for a minute for a kid.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so inability to find childcare because there's so high needs. Your sweet grandma at church or your teen girl at church, like it's often too much for them to care for those special needs. So you can't do, it's harder to get away for date nights. Vacations are almost, something that we just can't do during this season of life. And so that's kind of one of difficulty of leaving home, of like running away. Like we have our home, we have all types of specialty locks. We have to be super vigilant, like make sure that there's no human error, people not completely shutting a door. We have had so many times where we got to put out like little search parties to go find him, leaves at night. We've had to get the police involved several times.
Right.
Just where he's gotten quite away from home, and sometimes it's not just the door. He stacks up things outside and hops over the fence. Like, it's just, you're always on high alert because of that threat of leaving. The significant damage to property and cleaning, like he's, for example, taken an expensive laptop and thrown it out into the kiddie pool in the yard.
Right.
People are gonna think I'm exaggerating, but he's broken over like 20 tablets, like iPads and things like that. Just constantly smashing things. His new thing is cooking. He loves making, finding all the ingredients in the house and putting them all together in a big bowl. And it's sometimes you have to spend a lot more money.
Yes.
And you have to just kind of understand that a lot of things are getting broken. And so that also just kind of ties into the fact that we don't really go to other people's homes because, one, of the threat of running, and two is the fact that everything will get broken in your home because your home is not as child-proofed as ours.
You've put a lot of effort into making sure the cabinet doors are,
absolutely
sturdy and lockable.
Exactly.
And I have not.
Couple of others I'll just mention quickly. Violence to self and others. Just even people like he loves dearly. Just biting, clawing, punching, and then of course that threat becomes even something that gets scarier as they get older.
Right.
And so we're that's kind of one thing that we're thinking about right now. Just because we watch sometimes some videos of a fully with a full adult body and where they have that violence still, and just kind of thinking through that. So it's something we're not. He's just only 7 right now, but we think a lot about what is he gonna look like when he's 17 and 27. And
right. Yeah.
So these are some of the things that we think through. Fear of death, lots of close calls. Mentioned the freezer thing and the running away from home. So it's just like you're always thinking, because like there's so many more threats, like we especially against bodies of water and things like that.
Right.
Just you can't. You always are just on such high alert, thinking through burners on stove and things like that. We find you in the dryer. Thank goodness it's not turned on.
The switch is on the outside.
Yes, exactly.
Well, and that's the thing. It seems to be like he has difficulty recognizing the dangers to himself, even, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
And so, I'll just kind of like tie that into the last one. It's just kind of like sometimes it's easy to experience grief knowing that, your child might not get married. They might not be able to have, kids. And instead, that life might be replaced with a life of long-term care, where you'll be caring for them, into their adulthood. And so, that's another thing that parenting kids with autism, the parents will have to wrestle through and work towards, especially if it's maybe your only kid as well. You might never have grandkids. And so these are kind of some of the things to give you a window into what parents with autism are thinking through.
Right. Yeah. And then, of course, there's the helpful, so helpful people. Oh, hey, this caused that, or this cures that, or
yeah. we get used to the unsolicited advice. We've been asked we've had some kids come up to us and say, did you vaccinate your kids? We heard that's how you get autism. We've had those things,
yes.
and it's okay. We learned to roll with it.
Right.
But we can often feel alone and feel like people don't understand. So when people take the time to understand and learn about autism and to learn about some of the challenges we go through and to, kind of put themselves out of their comfort zone to, try to accommodate, it really means a lot. And it really goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing, your older boy really enjoys a good handshake when he walks into church.
Sure does.
Yeah, I love that. He walks straight up to me, shakes my hand. Good afternoon. Most excellent.
and this is one of the things that I've really appreciated about Christ Covenant Church as well, is there's a lot of people who've offered to help out the Gardiners on a Sunday and just like to help you guys be able to sit through a service.
Absolutely.
And I think this is really important for churches where families do have autistic children, is thinking about how you can bring rest on the Sabbath for these families.
Mm-hmm. So. Even if it's just for that hour and a half or 2 hours of worship.
Absolutely. There's lots of things that churches can do. And like Nathan just mentioned, we often have somebody who's willing to watch Lenny during the sermon portion. We try to keep them with us during the singing and most of the liturgy. But during the sermon portion, just allowing, a rest to be able to focus on the sermon so somebody else to watch. That's definitely one thing that can be done as a real blessing. But there's lots of other things too that churches can do to help support.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I know that the pressures that you guys are under in your constant vigilance, and it's absolutely necessary that you be that way and that you think that way. I can't tell you how many times my wife has just marveled at your wife, at her
Me
capacity,
too, bro. Me too.
at her capacity
Yes.
to be able to deal with so much stuff. Just amazing.
Yeah, she blows my mind too. Like she's an incredible wife and mother, and she really goes over above and beyond to not only just care for the needs, but also to help educate them and to give them bits of the true, the beautiful, and the good at their comprehension level, and to help them to thrive. Not to just survive, but to thrive in this world.
Yeah.
Appreciate God's good design.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
And with our homeschooling co-op, that's been one of the fun things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's been one of the fun things.
Yeah.
I don't know too many homeschooling co-ops where we've got a couple of autistic boys.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, your youngest boy isn't in the
No,
in the
that's
co-op,
right. He's
but
not, but the older one.
the older one
is.
is,
Yeah.
And it's been really good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so you mentioned a little earlier on that you went to Wycliffe Seminary at the University of Toronto, which is Anglican.
Yeah.
So what kind of led to your interest in the Anglican tradition? I know you've done classes over the years with Wycliffe. Tell us about your love for Anglicanism.
Yeah, so I mentioned I grew up in a Pentecostal home, and then when I kind of embraced the faith myself, I was more in Reformed Baptist churches. So, if you think about people like John MacArthur, Paul Washer, Vodi Bakum, people who, they were very big influences on my life growing up. And so I spent a lot of time in Reformed Baptist churches and enrolled at Moody Bible Institute, which is also a Baptist school, and did some online studies there. However, when I was going through my church history class, that's kind of when God was kind of working on me and just kind of opening up my eyes to it. I love school so much, and I love the fact that they often let you, at least in my experiences, both at Wycliffe and Moody, they allow you to, as long as it's on topic, kind of choose your paper topics, something that you want to research. And so one of the things I did was I wanted to research a history of baptism. and kind of go through what the early church believed about it.
Right.
And of course, remember, I'm a Baptist. And
Right.
so that was kind of one.
Nobody warned you?
And so I went through and I did a research and kind of just realized how infant baptism was the historic practice of the church. Of course, there was always Baptists throughout history. We talked about Constantine being baptized on his deathbed, although that's not a great example for the Baptists either.
Well, most of them don't like Constantine.
but there's always been, some who delayed their baptism, and but infant baptism has been the historic dominant practice throughout church history. And one of the things about changing your view on baptism is it does not allow you to become a Baptist pastor.
This is true.
Yes. And so I realized, my pastor at the time, he's an amazing guy, and I love him so much. And he basically said, Jeremy, I believe you're called to ministry, but it just can't be here because of that change. And so he kind of led me on a search to find out where I belong. One of the things particularly that has always, been something uniquely God put on my heart was a love of the unity of the church and a hatred for division and schism. And so I wanted to not be a part of any tradition that was furthering schism, and I wanted to be a part of a tradition that was working on healing old wounds. If I had been born in a time before 1054, my answer would be different. But hey, I grew up in a post-1054, which is the East and West schism. I grew up in a time in post-Reformation where there is thousands of different denominations. Sometimes that's a little unfair because some of them are in communion with each other, but there still is a lot of denominations who are not in communion with one another. Yep. And so I wanted to, I initially looked at the original Reformation is what I did, because I knew that there was differences with Rome and Eastern Orthodoxy where I could not go there. And I thought that the Protestant Reformation was necessary, and I still believe the Protestant Reformation was necessary. So I wanted to look at the original Reformation and kind of research them as the starting point. And so the original, when you exclude the black sheep of the Reformation, which would be the radical reformers,
the Anabaptists,
Sorry, guys.
Which, by the way, just so you know, is not exactly where modern Baptists are today. It's kind of more of the Amish Mennonite
more Puritan influences.
Yeah, so it's not modern Baptist, but
it's not the same.
No, it's not. But I want to look at the original Reformation, which was three groups. It was the Reformed on the continent. You had the Anglican in the British Isles, and then you had the Lutheran, which started off in Germany. And so that's kind of like where my starting point was. I wanted to see through these three traditions if I could find my home, rather than a more newer Methodism or Pentecostalism, something that came out of one of these groups. And so when I researched them, I kind of found that my heart was drawn towards Anglicanism, and specifically, I kind of also loved, in addition to more of the 39 Articles of Faith, which is the Confession of Faith, is a little bit more minimalistic, and I actually appreciated the fact that it allowed for unity within diversity. See, so one thing I always loved, some people might hate this, but I love the fact that you had one of by the way, I named my son George Whitefield Gardiner. George Whitefield was an Anglican, Calvinist Anglican preacher. And then you also had an Arminian, John Wesley, who was also Anglican, and they disagreed with each other. They wrote letters to one another, but they were able to be in the same tradition. And I really loved the fact that you could be together without splitting off and creating new denominations and refusing to work together. And so that was kind of like my heartbeat. And I really loved how Anglicanism was working towards communing with other traditions and healing those divides. And so that was kind of some of the things that drew me initially.
Oh, interesting. One of the fun things I like to point out about Anglicanism is it's just German Lutheranism with an English accent. Cranmer got Bootser to help him write the original Book of Common Prayer.
Yeah, no, exactly. I the way I would describe Anglicanism, if you're kind of wondering, is that I think Lutheranism and Reformed are have two different directions, two different emphasis, and then I look at Anglicanism as an amalgamation of both.
Synthesis.
Yeah, synthesis of both. So there's certain aspects where we look more Lutheran, there's certain aspects where we look more Reformed. Typically our doctrine more Reformed, and our what it looks like practically maybe a little bit more closer to the Lutheran.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the other great Anglican confessional document being the Westminster.
I know what you're getting at. Yes, yes.
Okay, so for those of you that don't know, the vast majority of those divines were Anglican.
Brad is getting his moment here. He
I
loves
am.
his church history moment.
I'm poking the bear a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
And speaking of which, there was a lot of Anglican guys at the Synod of Dort as well. They
It's interesting because
had to visit the Dutchmen and make sure that they stayed on track.
yeah, because the Dutchmen and the Anglicans knew this. The Dutchmen were gone. They were wow. So the I think it was James the First, who was the monarch at the time that Dort happened. He sent the commissioners over there and he said, "Please calm these Dutchmen down." Now the Anglican prelates that were at Dort had no. They didn't have any standing in the sense that they didn't get to vote on any of the heads of doctrine.
Okay.
But they were admitted in an advisory role, and they basically, I don't know, I can't say that they ran the debate, but they ran the floor on the debate. And what happened is Dort, and this is something a lot of people don't understand, it's a consensus document, deeply influenced by the Anglican prelates that were there. And they took the document back to James, and James was like, that's a great document, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, no, I love a book. What's it called? It's called Anglicanism or Reformed Catholic Tradition by Gerald Bray. And I think I could be wrong, but I think I remember he talks about the Westminster Confession of Faith. He actually calls that an Anglican document.
Yes.
Because the Westminster Confession started off as a revision of the 39 Articles, and it grew. So that was the base point, and then it kind of grew. But yeah.
So,
right.
so what I try to teach people about the time of the Reformation was that there was actually a lot of unity across the churches in Europe. But given the time, given the geography, given the ability to communicate at that time, the historical moment demanded that you have separate churches depending on the country.
Yeah.
So England had Anglicanism, Scotland had Presbyterianism, the Netherlands had the Dutch Reformed, you had the French Reformed, you had the Swiss Reformed, you had the
Lutherans.
the Lutherans.
Yeah.
So you kind of have like geographical pockets of the Reformation that have definitely theological distinctives, but all of them are, at least generally speaking, kind of working together and gunning on the same track.
Yeah.
The biggest tension you have is probably between Luther and Calvin, and I think Luther towards the end of his life realized that he could have worked out some of their differences. Zwingli, of course, off on the sideline, was probably one of the more...
Yeah, he's more influential in Baptistic theology.
Yeah.
More or less.
But yeah, like when you look at the proliferation of information in the Reformation, so Gutenberg starts printing in the 15th century in central Germany, and then Luther, like book sales are taking off, and then they kind of plateau because everybody's just they're not really printing anything new, and then Luther just can't stop writing. Right, he just can't shut up, and so all of a sudden there's like pamphlets and books, and there's a whole bunch of new stuff, and everyone's like, he's arguing with Erasmus over in Rotterdam, who's got a publishing house in his own backyard, and he's writing back, and then you've got guys like Bootser, and he's in communication with Cranmer in England, and you look at the things that are being in the Reformation that are being discussed and taught, and they're all dealing with the same questions. They're all coming to many of the same answers. But yeah, it does look different on national lines, and then it does develop over time out from that.
Yeah.
And that's and then you get down to the modern day where we're hyper schismatic.
Yeah.
We started in the Reformation from what I believe to be a non-schismatic place.
Right. Reforming, not
Reforming.
trying to create something new.
Yeah, like Luther, his big thing was he got kicked out.
Right.
And he was very, very clear about, I did not leave.
Right.
I got kicked out. Calvin, same thing, got kicked out. Got kicked out of his entire country, in fact. So, and then in England, you have this interesting thing with Henry VIII and then Cranmer, and then you've got this interesting history. It's very interesting. And it's not always what if you watch a movie on Henry VIII, it might not give you a clear picture of what was going on. But when you get into it, it's very, very interesting, because you had a lot of people pushing for the Reformation of the church who were reading Luther in England because he'd been translated.
Yeah.
We could probably go for another hour or 2 or 3 or 4 here. So
Yeah. Oh, more. Give me more.
anyway, thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, Jeremy, we thank you very much for coming in and joining us around this table. We love being able to sit down and just have a conversation and find out what God has done in your world and what he's doing and the things that you're up against. And so thank you very much. We very much appreciate you coming in. We are the Chinook Podcast, and it is our delight to bring you some of these various different conversations that we have. We would like that the Lord would move by his Spirit like that Chinook wind rolling down the east side of the Rockies and warming things up out here in Alberta. We would like the Spirit of God to do that and bring many, many people to Jesus here. And we're glad you're on board, Jeremy, and we're glad for you, listener. And we wish the Lord's blessing upon you as you seek to serve him.
Amen.